Where are they now? Reality TV stars. The people who were famous for being themselves, then and now. Written, produced, and directed by Barron. Narrated by Morgan Robinson. A note on this book. Everything you are about to hear is built from the public record. Interviews these people gave, shows that were broadcast into 100 million living rooms, announcements they made themselves, obituaries written by people who loved them. Nothing here is invented. Where a life turned hard, we tell you the truth of it, but we do not linger over the wreckage, and we do not pretend to know a person's heart better than they knew it themselves. These were ordinary people who agreed to live in front of cameras, which turns out to be one of the strangest bargains the modern world ever offered anyone. And they are owed the same respect in the retelling that they never quite got in the editing room. Some of the people in this book are still with us, still busy, still building second and third acts that the shows never predicted. Some of them are gone. We will hold both in the same hand because that is what it means to ask the question this whole series is built on. Not what happened to them at the height of it. What happened after? Where are they now? Introduction: the people who played themselves. There is a particular kind of famous that reality television makes, and it is unlike any other. A movie star is playing someone else and you both know it. A singer gives you 3 minutes at a time, polished until it shines. But a reality star gives you themselves, or something close enough to themselves that the difference stops mattering, and they do it in your living room week after week in their pajamas at their worst, in the middle of an argument they will never live down. You did not admire these people from a distance. You knew them. You had opinions about their relationships. You took sides at their dinner tables. You watched them cry in a confessional at 2 in the morning, and you felt entitled to that because the show told you that you were. That is the strange bargain at the center of this whole book. In 1992, 7 strangers agreed to live in a New York loft in front of cameras, and the announcer said the words that started everything. This is the true story. Nobody involved could have guessed that those 7 people were the first citizens of a country that half the world now lives in. A country where being watched is a job, where a kitchen argument can outlive a presidency, where a person can be famous for nothing more and nothing less than being exactly who they are loudly on a schedule. We froze them at that moment. That is the trick of it. In our memory, the island winner is forever standing at tribal council. The Bachelorette is forever holding the final rose. The kid from the singing show is forever 17 and shaking in front of the judges. We do not want to think about what happened when the cameras packed up and went to the next town, when the check stopped, when the phone stopped ringing, when the person who had been the most talked about face in America went to the grocery store 18 months later and got a look that said, "Did you used to be somebody?" There is no crueler question in American English, and it is always asked with a smile. This book is about what happened next, not the recap. You already know the recap, you lived through it, you argued about it at work the next morning. This is the after. Because here is the thing about reality stars that nobody warned them about. An actor gets to leave the character behind. A reality star is the character. When America decided it hated the villain of a certain season, it did not hate a script. It hated a person who had a mother and a mortgage and a Tuesday to get through. And when America loved someone, it loved them so suddenly and so completely that the person had about 18 months to figure out how to turn a wave into a life before the wave moved on to someone new. Some of them figured it out and built empires that make the shows look like a footnote. Some of them simply went home, hung the fame in the closet, and got on with being who they had always been. Some of them got lost in the distance between the person on the screen and the person in the mirror, and a few of those stories are hard, and we are going to tell them anyway, gently, because you already know them in your bones. So this is a walk back through the strangers, the castaways, the singers, the suitors, the housewives and house guests and shore kids and duck hunters who taught America a brand new way of being famous. And then it is a walk forward to find out where the road took them, because the road took them everywhere. To law school, to the fire academy, to the hospital night shift, to sobriety, to Broadway. To a ranch in Missouri, where a woman who gave the most famous speech in television history drives a truck and does not answer reporters, because she said what she had to say the first time. Dozens of names are coming. Some you will remember instantly, some you will be startled to discover you never forgot. The camera light is about to come on. Let us go back. The strangers picked to live in a house. Before the island, before the roses, before anyone sang for a golden ticket, there was a loft in Soho and a sentence that changed television. 7 strangers picked to live in a house to find out what happens when people stop being polite and start getting real. The Real World was not the first documentary about ordinary people, but it was the first to understand that ordinary people, edited well, were a better show than anything a writer could invent. 7 kids arguing about dishes and prejudice and phone bills, with no idea they were a hinge in television history. Everyone in this book walks through the door those first casts opened. Eric Nyes. A camera in the corner of a Soho loft, 1992, and a model from New Jersey who did not yet know he was the first of his kind. Eric Nyes was the handsome one in that founding New York cast, the one MTV pulled out almost immediately and handed a hosting job, because the network understood before anyone that these people were not documentary subjects. They were stars. He hosted The Grind, MTV's daily dance show, and for a stretch of the 90s, his abs were arguably the most broadcast abs in America. A generation of kids doing workout videos in their basements were doing them with Eric Nyes, which means he may be personally responsible for more national calorie burn than any man of his era. Then the spotlight drifted, the way it always does, and Eric did something genuinely interesting with the rest of his life. He went inward. He spent years pursuing wellness and spiritual healing work, the kind of path that gets a smirk from people who have never needed one, and he stayed on it through the long seasons when nobody was watching, which is the only test of a path that counts. He has been open in recent years about a serious health diagnosis, a chronic autoimmune condition called myasthenia gravis, and in a turn that sounds like fiction, a blood sample he donated back in his real-world days ended up helping doctors understand and treat what was happening in his body decades later. The show that made him famous at 20 took care of him at 50. He still turns up on podcasts to talk about that loft with the fondness of a man describing his freshman dorm, which, in every way that matters, it was. Where is he now? He is a wellness teacher living with a hard diagnosis in the open, and the first face reality television ever made is still, 3 decades on, trying to help people feel better in theirs. Heather B. Gardner. Tomorrow morning, before most of the country has poured its first coffee, she will be on the radio, because she is on the radio every morning and has been for a very long time. Heather B. Gardner was the realest person in the first Real House, a hip-hop artist from Jersey City who moved into that loft already signed, already serious, and treated the show like what it was, a temporary address. She made her records, and then she did something almost nobody else in this book managed. She built a long, steady, completely normal broadcasting career, the kind you earn shift by shift, with no scandal and no comeback special, because she never went anywhere. For more than 14 years, she has been on satellite radio every morning, co-hosting Sway in the Morning on Shade 45 alongside Sway Calloway, one of the most respected seats in hip-hop radio, and she hosts her own show besides. Morning radio is a trade with no edit and no second take. The light goes on, the mic opens, and whatever you actually are is what goes out, which may explain why the first genuinely real person the genre ever cast ended up in the one job that demands it daily. Ask a certain generation about Heather B. and they will say the Real World. Ask working radio people and they will tell you there is no steadier voice in the format. Both things are true, and she outgrew the first one so thoroughly that it reads like a trivia answer now. There is something worth pausing on in how she did it, because the radio chair she holds is not a nostalgia hire. Shade 45 is a competitive, opinionated working room, and she has held her seat there through every change the music industry could throw at it, which takes exactly the quality the loft first showed the country, a person with no interest in performing anything she was not. The kids who came into the format after her, the ones who treated the cameras as a career, could learn everything they need from her example, which is that the cameras were never the career. The craft was. Where is she now? She is on the air, where she has been the whole time, the first reality star to solve the puzzle by simply going back to work. Pedro Zamora. Some stories in this book are triumphant, and some are cautionary, and one of them is sacred. Pedro Zamora came to the real world San Francisco in 1994 as a 22-year-old Cuban-American AIDS educator who was himself living with the disease, and he did something no one on American television had ever done. He let the country watch him live with it. Not a headline, not a statistic, a roommate. A young man who laughed and argued and fell in love, and who exchanged vows with his partner Sean on national television at a time when that alone was almost unthinkable, and who was dying, and who let the cameras stay because he understood exactly what it would mean for a frightened kid somewhere to see a person with AIDS being loved instead of feared. Think for a moment about what that took in 1994 to be young and gay and Cuban-American and sick and completely unashamed, in front of a country that was still learning to say the name of the disease out loud. He did the teaching gently, at the kitchen table, one episode at a time, and the country did not even realize it was in school. He died on November 11, 1994, at the age of 22, hours after the final episode of his season aired. The President of the United States praised him by name, saying he had changed the face of the epidemic. It is not an exaggeration to say that no one in the entire history of reality television ever used the cameras for a higher purpose, and no one ever will. He is the standard. Where is he now? He is in every honest conversation this medium has ever managed to start, and his name is still spoken with reverence by people who were not born when he passed. In memoriam, Pedro Zamora, 1972 to 1994. David Rainey, a word briefly. Honesty requires us to pause here, because not every door that first era opened led somewhere good. David Rainey, who the country knew as Puck, the bike messenger from the San Francisco season, became reality television's first true villain, the first person a whole nation agreed to be angry at, and the first proof of how strange and corrosive that particular kind of fame can be. His road after the show turned genuinely dark, with serious legal trouble of the kind this series does not dramatize, and his current whereabouts are not public. We will not linger because there is a person under every persona, and some stories are best told with a short sentence and a straight face. He was the warning delivered in the very first act that being watched is not the same as being well. Where is he now? Out of public view, and we will leave him there and wish him better roads. John Brennan's A Cowboy Hat in a Lowe's Angel's House, 1993. Under it, a 19-year-old from Kentucky, deeply religious, carrying a singing dream, dropped into a home full of people who had never met anyone like him, which of course was the entire point. John Brennan was the first proof that the format worked best when it put people together who would never have chosen each other. And he came through it entirely himself, which in hindsight was its own kind of victory. And here is the part that will make you smile. More than 30 years later, the singing dream is not a memory. It is in progress. John released a new country single at the end of 2025, a song called Tell Me That There Ain't a God, written with a respected Nashville songwriter, with a video premiere on a country network and a proper streaming release behind it. 32 years between the audition tape and the single. Most dreams do not survive a winter that long. His wintered fine. He is still in Kentucky, still himself, and he co-hosts a weekly podcast with Bate Stolarczyk, his old Lowe's Angels roommate, which means two people who met as strangers in front of cameras in 1993 are still talking to each other every week on purpose, for fun. Somewhere in that fact is the sweetest possible answer to what those shows were for. Think about what that podcast actually is underneath the format. Two people who were cast by strangers specifically because they came from worlds designed to collide, and 30 years later the collision has become one of the longest friendships either of them has. The producers were selling conflict. What they accidentally manufactured, over and over across these early seasons, was family, the kind you do not choose, which is the kind that teaches you the most. Where is he now? Kentucky, mostly, a country singer with brand new music and an old friend on the other microphone, and the dream did not expire. It just took the long way to Nashville. The island that changed television. Picture the summer of 2000 for a moment. The century had just turned. Half the country still had a phone attached to the kitchen wall. And on a Wednesday night at the end of May, CBS put 16 ordinary Americans on a beach in Borneo, handed them rice and a machete, and told them that every 3 days they would gather in the dark and vote one of their own out of the tribe. 51 million people watched the last episode of that first season. 51 million. There are Super Bowls that would take that number. For one summer, the water cooler question in every office in America was the same question, and it was about strangers on a beach. Survivor did not just succeed. It rewired the entire television industry in one summer, and it did it with a cast of truck drivers and teachers and retired Navy men who had answered a newspaper ad. The word castaway did not have a career path attached to it yet. It was just 16 people, a beach, a torch, and a country that discovered all at once that it could not look away. Richard Hatch. Day 1, Borneo, 2000. 16 Americans are unpacking on a beach, and 15 of them are worried about shelter. The 16th, a corporate trainer from Rhode Island, is already counting votes. The remarkable thing about Richard Hatch, watching it back now, is that he was simply playing a game nobody else had realized was a game. While his tribe mates debated fairness, he built the first alliance in Survivor history. He caught fish while everyone else went hungry, so they could not afford to vote him out. And he sat at the final tribal council and told the jury, more or less, that he had outplayed them, and they gave him the $1 million because it was the truth. Every reality competition winner since, every alliance, every blindside on every show in every country, descends from what that man did on that beach. The road after was harder than the game. The taxes on that $1 million prize went unpaid, and it cost him dearly, including time in federal prison, a chapter he has long since served out. And the game, it turns out, never really let go of him, or he never let go of it. Today, Richard Hatch is in his 60s, still one of the most recognizable names the format ever produced, still active in the Survivor community, breaking down current seasons on his own YouTube channel, turning up at fan conventions where the people who once shouted at their televisions about him now line up for photographs. Time does that. The villain of the summer becomes the elder statesman of the reunion, and the old outrage mellows into something closer to gratitude. The tax matter, remarkably, is still not fully behind him. A court ruled in 2026 on the interest that has piled up across a quarter century, and he is appealing, which makes him, as far as anyone can tell, the only man in America still in active litigation with the summer of 2000. The $1 million he won in the most watched game in television history remains, all these years later, an open file. There is something almost mythological in that, the prize that never finished arriving. Where is he now? Still the original winner, the man who invented how to play, still arguing with the scorekeepers, still absolutely certain he was right, and about the game itself he was. Ruddy Bosch. 72 years old, more than 4 decades a Navy SEAL, and there he was on a beach in Borneo, surrounded by young people arguing about who ate more rice. Ruddy Bosch was a retired Master Chief who had done actual survival in actual jungles, and the oldest man on that first beach became its most beloved. He said exactly what he thought, in a gravel voice, with a bluntness that television had not yet learned to fake, and the country fell completely in love with him. He gave his confessionals like a man filing a report, because as far as he was concerned, that was what a microphone was for. His unlikely friendship with Richard Hatch, the gruff old military man and the scheming corporate trainer, was the first great odd couple reality television ever produced, and Ruddy's loyalty in a game built on betrayal was so absolute that it nearly carried him to the end. He went home to Virginia Beach, to Marge, his wife of more than 50 years, and lived exactly the life he had always lived, the most famous man in America who changed not one single thing about himself. He came back for another season at 75 because of course he did. Ruddy passed away on November 1, 2019 at 91 after a battle with Alzheimer's in hospice in the town he had served from for decades. The tributes came from everywhere, from television people and from Navy men, and they all said the same thing, that what you saw was exactly what he was. In a book full of people navigating the gap between their screen self and their real self, Ruddy Bosch never had a gap. Where is he now? He is the standard for coming through this whole strange machine unchanged. In Memoriam, Ruddy Bosch, 1928 to 2019. Susan Hawke. She gave the speech. If you watched that first season, you did not forget it, and if you did not, you have still somehow heard of it. Susan Hawke was a truck driver from Wisconsin, plain-spoken and proud of it, and at the final tribal council, betrayed and furious, she stood up and delivered an address to the two finalists that instantly entered the American vocabulary. The snake and the rat speech. Television scholars have written about it. Comedians have performed it. 25 years of reality contestants have tried to write their own version of it in the parking lot before the finale, and none of them have come close because hers was not written. It erupted. And then Susan Hawke did the most radical thing anyone in this book ever did. She went home. Not fake went home, not went home and waited for the spin-off. She went home to the Midwest, back to trucking. And when the show's 25th anniversary came around in 2025, and every outlet in America wanted the woman who gave the speech, she declined, politely, every single one of them, from a ranch near a small town in Missouri, where she lives with her husband and drives a truck and owes the viewing public exactly nothing. There is a dignity in that refusal that gets more impressive every year. She said what she had to say the first time, all of it in one take, and everything since has been silence, which is what people who mean it sound like afterward. Where is she now? Picture a truck on a Missouri highway at dawn, the radio on, the sun coming up over the flat country, and a woman at the wheel who once held 50 million people completely still. She is hauling freight somewhere between here and there, the author of the most famous speech in the history of the genre, and she has no interest in giving another one. Colleen Haskell. Everyone who watched that first season remembers her, the college student with the smile, the one pure civilian in a cast that was rapidly learning to scheme, the person America decided without ever taking a vote was the sweetheart of the whole experiment. Hollywood noticed, the way Hollywood does. Within a year, Colleen Haskell was starring in a studio comedy opposite Rob Schneider, and the whole apparatus stood ready to make her into whatever she wanted to be. She looked at all of it, the premieres, the magazine covers, the entire conveyor belt of fame that people spend their lives clawing toward, and she said no thank you, and she meant it. A single film, a little producing work behind the camera, and then a complete, deliberate, permanent exit. No farewell interview, no letter to the fans. She stepped out of the frame and let the door click shut behind her softly, like someone leaving early from a party that had gotten too loud. She married a musician. She raised 2 daughters. She has not given an interview in more than 2 decades, and when the anniversary coverage came around, the shows used old footage, because there is no new footage, because she is not a public person anymore and does not wish to be. And the public, to its credit, has mostly respected it, holding on to her the way you hold on to a favorite song from a summer that ended. Every few years an anniversary rolls around and someone asks where she went, and the answer never changes. Exactly where she wanted. Where is she now? She is living a private life she chose with her eyes wide open, the one who saw the whole machine first and walked away smiling, and wherever she is today, she is not reading this, and that is exactly the point. Elizabeth Hasselbeck. What does a fourth-place finish on an island get you? In her case, a chair. Elizabeth Hasselbeck was the shoe designer from the season in the Australian outback, a cheerful competitor who made the Final Four and made an impression. And what happened next made her among the most consequential alumni the show ever produced, because she parlayed a reality season not into another reality season, but into a seat that mattered. A seat at the table on The View, where for a decade she was a voice half the country argued with over breakfast, holding her corner opposite some of the biggest personalities in the business, becoming a household name to millions who never saw her boil water on a beach. Say what you will about any given morning of it, and America said everything daily, but a decade is a very long run in a chair built to eject people. She left the show, wrote books, raised 3 children with her husband Tim, a former NFL quarterback, and stepped back from the daily arena by choice. And then in the spring of 2026, 13 years after she left, she walked back onto The View as a guest co-host, and it was an event, headlines, sparks, the whole thing, because some people simply generate voltage at a table. She turned up guest hosting network morning television again weeks later. The industry keeps handing her microphones because the industry knows what she is, which is a person incapable of being boring on camera. Where is she now? She is a mother of 3 who came off an island 25 years ago and is still, whenever she feels like it, as watchable as anyone on daytime television, proof that the shortest path from a beach in the outback to the center of American conversation runs directly through being unafraid. Rupert Boneham. The tie-dyed shirt arrived 3 seasons in, with a bear of a man inside it and a pirate laugh you could hear from the parking lot. And within about 2 episodes, Rupert Boneham was the most popular contestant the show had ever cast. He stole the other tribe's shoes on day 1, and the country, which generally frowns on theft, rose and cheered. He built like a castaway out of a storybook, fished like it was his calling, and lost repeatedly in ways that felt so unjust that America simply overruled the game. When the show held a fan vote across all its seasons, the audience handed Rupert $1 million for being Rupert. It remains one of the few votes in American life whose result nobody has ever disputed. The game never crowned him. The country did. What makes him worth this chapter is what he did before and after, because the tie-dye was not a costume. Rupert had spent years, before anyone knew his name, mentoring troubled kids in Indiana, and he took his fame and his fan vote million and poured it into that work. His organization, Rupert's Kids, has spent 2 decades helping young people and adults coming out of the justice system learn to work and stand up straight. And it is still going, now with an arcade in the Indianapolis area that puts his participants on the payroll. Public television profiled him again just this year, grayer, still enormous, still laughing like a pirate. He will tell anyone who asks that he was disappointed not to get the call for the show's 50th season, and then he will tell you he watched it anyway, because of course he did. There is a detail in his operation that tells you who he is better than any tribal council ever did. The arcade is not a gimmick. It exists because the young people he works with need first jobs that will actually take them, references that will actually vouch for them, somewhere to learn that showing up on Tuesday matters, and Rupert understood that a paycheck teaches things a lecture cannot. The man built his shelter on the island out of whatever the beach gave him, and he has built his life's work the same way, out of whatever the system discarded and both structures held. Where is he now? Indiana, running the non-profit that was always the real him, the fan favorite who took the love of 50 million strangers and spent it on kids nobody else was rooting for. Ethan Zone. A soccer ball, $1 million check, and an idea nobody in the genre had thought of yet. Ethan Zone won the Africa season, a professional soccer player with an easy smile, and he did something with the money that nobody had done before. He co-founded a charity. Grassroots Soccer, an organization that uses the game to teach kids in Africa about health and HIV prevention, built in the glow of a reality show win, decades before anyone used the word influencer. It made him the format's first great philanthropist, the answer to every critic who said these shows produced nothing but noise. Then life handed him a fight nobody signs up for. A rare cancer, Hodgkin lymphoma, in his mid-30s, beaten once and then back again and beaten again. He let the public watch the whole fight, the treatments, the fear, the slow return of strength, and he ran a marathon between rounds of chemotherapy because he is, at the cellular level, a competitor. Sit with that phrase, between rounds. Most of us reschedule a dentist appointment with less on the line. Today, Ethan Zone is in remission and has been for years. A motivational speaker who talks to rooms full of people about surviving the thing they are most afraid of. And he is still at the galas for Grassroots Soccer, which has now reached millions of young people. An organization that outgrew its origin story so long ago that new staff must be startled to learn there was ever a game show involved. When the 50th season aired in 2026, he gave interviews cheering for the winner, saying his own door back to the island was, in his words, a little bit closed, and sounding entirely at peace with that. Where is he now? He is healthy, which is the only sentence in his file that matters, and the charity he built out of a game show win all those years ago is still teaching kids on 2 continents how to live. And a word about the man standing at the front of all of it. Jeff Probst, the host who started reading votes on that beach in 2000, read them again this year in 2026, for the show's 50th season, an all-star season the fans themselves helped design. Same host, same torch, same snuffer, half a century of seasons deep. In an industry where everything changes every 18 months, there is something almost geological about that. Some institutions turn out to be a person. The ones who walked away on purpose. Before we go on, stop and notice something, because it runs against everything you have been told about these people. The assumption about reality stars is that they are the hungriest people in America, that they would do anything to stay on your screen, and for some of them, sure, the shoe fits. But scattered all through this book are the other ones. The truck driver who gave the most famous speech in television history and never gave another interview. The sweetheart who got handed a movie career and traded it for a house and 2 daughters. The first bachelor, whom you will meet shortly, who simply resumed being a businessman as though the whole thing had been a semester abroad. The format's dirty little secret is that some of the people it made famous looked directly at fame, understood it completely, and decided it was not worth the trade. Do not mistake them for failures. The machine tells you that leaving the stage is losing because it needs you to believe that. Every talk show booking, every anniversary special, every knock on the door of a ranch in Missouri is the same message delivered in different envelopes, that a person only exists while being watched. But it takes a very particular strength to be handed the thing everyone else is starving for, and to hand it back because you have read the price tag all the way to the bottom. And notice what the ones who left all had in common. They knew who they were before the cameras found them, a student, a trucker, a businessman, and so when the cameras left, nothing essential left with them. As you meet the ones who stayed and the ones who built empires and the ones who got hurt, keep the ones who walked away in the corner of your eye. They are the control group. They are what it looks like when a person uses the door. Singing for America. Now come with us to a summer night in 2002, a family sofa, a telephone with buttons. A television talent show had crossed the ocean from Britain, and something about the American version caught fire in a way nobody fully predicted. Ordinary kids walked into an audition room in front of 3 judges, one of them famously merciless, and sang, and the country itself got to vote. The telephone became a ballot box, and the family sofa became a jury bench. American Idol did not just make stars. It made the audience the kingmaker, and for a decade the finales were national events on a scale television will probably never see again, school nights when whole households argued over one phone. These are the kids who stood on the X, and this is what the X did to them, and for them, in the long run. William Hung. Begin with the young man who could not sing, because his story might be the most quietly wonderful in this entire section. William Hung was a civil engineering student at Berkeley when he auditioned in 2004 with the song She Bangs, arms flailing, completely off-key, completely sincere, and when the judges stopped him, he said something that made him immortal. He said he had no professional training and that he had given it his best and that he had no regrets at all. The clip detonated across an early internet that was just learning what viral meant, forwarded inbox to inbox, office by office, in the years before anyone had a share button. And here is what everyone got wrong. The country was not only laughing at him. Some enormous portion of it was rooting for him, because in a show built on polish, he had accidentally demonstrated something realer, a person trying his hardest at something he loved in public without shame. He sold albums, hundreds of thousands of them. He performed everywhere, leaned into the joke without ever quite becoming it. And then, when the noise finally faded, he did something the punchline version of his story never predicted. He went back to the numbers. William Hung became a statistician, and today he works as a senior crime analyst for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, which means the crime data of the nation's largest county is examined daily by the most famous rejected contestant television has ever produced, and both parties seem entirely satisfied with the arrangement. He has been open about a detour through professional poker and a gambling problem he had to face down, and he talks about it now the way he talked to those judges, plainly, without flinching. He remarried in 2023, and in 2026 at a technology conference, he stepped up to a microphone and performed She Bangs again, 22 years later, to a room that absolutely lost its mind with joy. He said he had given his best, and he has never once stopped keeping that promise. Where is he now? He is a crime analyst in Los Angeles, and the man America once giggled at has spent 2 decades being braver, in broad daylight, than almost everyone who laughed. Justin Guarini. September 2002. Confetti is falling, and it is falling on the person standing next to him. Justin Guarini was the other half of the very first finale, the curly-haired charmer beside Kelly Clarkson on the night The Machine crowned its first star. And coming second in a coronation is a strange thing to build a life on. There was a movie, which the culture spent years treating as a punchline, and there was a stretch, he has said since, when the work got thin and the money got thinner. That is the part of the silver medal nobody sees. What he built next is the part worth telling. He went to the theater. Broadway, real Broadway, show after show, a working actor with genuine chops who earned his way into rooms that do not care about television. He became, of all things, among the most familiar commercial voices and faces in America, the velvet-voiced Lil Sweet of a soda campaign that ran for years. A joke he was fully in on and profited from handsomely, which may be the healthiest possible relationship a man can have with his own punchline. He voices a character on a Disney animated series, which means a generation of children knows his voice without ever knowing he almost won the whole thing first. He coaches performers on auditioning, runs a real business at it, and headlines galas with orchestras. His personal life has had a recent turn, a marriage ending, which we note only in passing because it is his to carry. And there is a generosity in his current chapter that deserves the last word. The coaching business is real teaching, hundreds of performers walking into auditions steadier because a man who once stood on the most watched audition stage in history told them what he wished someone had told him. The format handed Justin Guarini the hardest assignment it gives anyone, which is almost. He has spent 20 years converting almost into a working life most drama school graduates would trade for, and then turning around and holding the door. Where is he now? A working performer in the fullest sense of the word, the first runner-up the show ever made, and the rare one who turned the silver medal into a toolbox instead of a wound. Ruben stuttered. They called him the Velvet Teddy Bear, and the name has never stopped being accurate. Ruben Studdard came out of Birmingham, Alabama with a church-trained baritone as warm as a Sunday kitchen. And in 2003, he won the second season of American Idol in the closest finale the show ever staged. More than 24 million votes, decided by a margin thinner than a percentage point, against an opponent the country loved almost exactly as much. He made his records, won his fans, weathered the label churn that eats most Idol winners, and then he settled into the career he was probably always meant for, which is standing on a stage with a band and singing love songs to grown folks who came to feel something. He found his lane in the songs of Luther Vandross, the singer he was compared to from the very first audition, and his tribute shows have become his signature, filling theaters from Detroit to Las Vegas. The comparison that once sounded like pressure turned out to be a map. He is booked steadily through this year and next, still touring, still velvet. There is no scandal in this file, no collapse, no cautionary turn. He has spent more than 20 years declining to become interesting in the tabloid sense, which in this book qualifies as a superpower. Just a man from Birmingham doing the exact thing he auditioned to do, decade after decade. It is worth saying what a rarity that is in this business. The winners of these shows were handed the hardest version of the bargain, a record deal built on a moment, a label expecting lightning twice, and most of those stories curdle into what might have been. Rubens never did because he seems to have known from the start what he was, not a pop experiment, but a singer, the kind who gets better rooms and better bands as the decades go on, the kind whose voice is the product and whose product does not expire. 20 years from now, there will still be a marquee somewhere with his name on it, and the room will still be full. Where is he now? On a stage somewhere tonight, with a microphone and a rhythm section, singing Luther to a room full of people slow dancing at their seats. And if there is a happier place to be, nobody has found it. Clay Aiken. Losing, it turns out, can be a career if you do it by a whisker on the most watched stage in America. Clay Aiken was the skinny kid from Raleigh with the choir boy face who lost that same closest finale in television history, and then he outsold nearly everybody. His first album went multi-platinum out of the gate. His fan base, the self-named Claymates, was as devoted an army as the pop machine ever assembled. He toured, he did Broadway, he wrote a book, and then he did the thing nobody on a talent show had ever done. He ran for Congress. Twice. A reality singing show contestant, standing in church basements in North Carolina talking policy, and while he did not win, the sheer unlikeliness of the road commands a certain respect. He also became, along the way, one of the most visible openly gay men in American entertainment, a door he opened at real personal cost in an era when it was genuinely risky. And then, after nearly 2 decades away from recording, came 2026, a brand new single called Rewind, his first in 18 years, a title that practically winks at you. And in May, on the American Idol finale, 23 years after he stood on that stage and lost by a whisper, Clay Aiken walked back out and sang a duet with a young finalist from his home state, and his teenage son got to watch his father be that guy. 23 years between finale performances on the same show. Nobody else has that sentence, and nobody is likely to get it. Where is he now? He is back on the record shelves and back on that stage, the most successful second-place finisher in the history of the format, and still, unmistakably, the kid from Raleigh. Taylor Hicks. He was nobody's idea of a pop star, which is exactly why he won. Taylor Hicks was a gray-haired soul singer from Alabama, pushing 30, dancing like your uncle at a wedding, singing like the house band at the best bar you ever accidentally walked into. And in 2006, the country chose him over the polished kids by the tens of millions, his soul patrol chanting his name. It remains one of the great populist verdicts in the show's history. He has been honest lately about what came after, saying out loud this very summer that life after winning was a lot tougher than it seems. The label wanted a pop star and had signed a soul man. The industry moved on fast, but Taylor Hicks did what soul men do, which is keep the band together and keep playing. He settled in Nashville, toured the rooms that fit him, took a long Vegas residency, invested in restaurants, And this year, on the 20th anniversary of his win, released a new single called The Mirror and sang as part of the country's 250th birthday celebrations. 20 years on, he is still exactly the musician those millions of voters heard the first time. There is an honesty in his recent interviews that makes you root for him all over again. He does not perform bitterness, and he does not perform triumph. He simply tells the truth, that winning the biggest show on television at the exact moment the music industry wanted something younger and shinier was a strange gift, and that the gray-haired soul man the voters chose was always going to have to build his career the way soul men build them, room by room, night by night. The voters, it turns out, were right about him. It just took the long way to prove it, and 20 years is a long time to be right slowly. Where is he now? Nashville, with a working band and new music, 20 years past the confetti, proof that the wave ends but the gig, if you are lucky and stubborn, does not. Sanjia Malakar. For one strange, unforgettable spring in 2007, a 17-year-old with a shy smile and adventurous hair was the most argued about person in American entertainment. Sanjia Malakar kept surviving elimination week after week, past singers the judges plainly preferred, powered by some perfect storm of teenage fans, internet mischief, and the country's sheer fascination, and the discourse got loud enough that late-night hosts, news anchors, and an entire nation of office break rooms weighed in on a high school junior. The whole spectacle, in the end, had almost nothing to do with him. He was just the kid standing where the country happened to be pointing. It is worth saying plainly, all these years later, that he was a kid, and that very little of that circus was fair to him, and he has spoken since about how much it hurt. The country eventually apologized in the only way countries know how, by changing the subject. Which is why where he landed reads like a happy ending, even though it looks nothing like fame. Sanjia stepped all the way out of the machine. By the most recent accounts he has given, he built a life in hospitality, tending bar and working as a pastry chef, most recently in Montana, still making music when he feels like it and posting it without fanfare for whoever finds it. He came out as bisexual in a podcast conversation years ago, on his own terms in his own time. He owes the spotlight nothing, and he has taken nothing from it in years. Where is he now? He is somewhere behind a bar or an oven, by his own last accounting, making things with his hands for people standing right in front of him. And after the spring America put him through, there is something close to poetry in that. Kelly Pickler. She walked into the audition room in 2006, a 19-year-old roller skating waitress from a small town in North Carolina, raised in hard circumstances by her grandparents, and she sang a Martina McBride song called A Broken Wing, about a woman who flies away from a hard life on wings nobody can see. The country fell for her instantly, the accent, the candor, the story. She became a genuine country star after the show, gold records, hit singles, a beloved run on a dancing competition that she won outright, a daytime talk show of her own. She married a songwriter named Kyle Jacobs, and for a while the story was simply sweet. Then came February of 2023, and the worst day of her life when she lost her husband, and the music stopped. For more than 3 years, Kelly Pickler was almost entirely out of public view, grieving, retreating to a quieter life in Nashville, and the industry and her fans did something unusual for this business. They waited gently with the porch light on. And on a May night in 2026, on the American Idol finale stage, 20 years after her audition, Kelly Pickler came back. She stood beside a young finalist named Hannah Harper and sang A Broken Wing, the same song, the very one that started everything, 20 years after a 19-year-old waitress first sang it into that machinery with everything still ahead of her. And there was not a dry eye in the building or in a few million living rooms. She has not announced albums or tour. She does not owe anyone that. She walked out, sang the song about surviving, and proved it. Where is she now? She is in Nashville, standing back up at her own pace, and the girl who sang about a broken wing has shown the country, in the hardest way possible, what those wings are actually for. The Boardroom and the Rose. Two more doors opened in the early 2000s, and America walked through both without hesitating. In one, a businessman sat at a long table and fired somebody every week, and ordinary strivers in rented suits fought for a job. In the other, a single rose passed from one hand to another decided the nation's Monday night conversation. The competition show had discovered ambition and romance, the two oldest stories there are, and the people who lived those first seasons had no map for what came next, because nobody yet knew what a rose or a firing did to an ordinary resume. Bill Rancic. In 2004, more than 200,000 people applied for one job, and the interview was televised. The man who got the offer was Bill Rancic, a Chicago entrepreneur who won the first season of The Apprentice back when the show was simply a business competition and its biggest star was the skyline. He managed real projects, took the win, and then did something instructive. He did not chase another show. He married one, in a sense, meeting the entertainment journalist Giuliana DePandy, and the two of them built one of the sturdiest marriages in an industry that eats them. More than 20 years and counting. A son named Duke. A run of restaurants in Chicago and beyond, real estate, books, and as of this spring, a podcast they host together about all of it. On it, they said the kind of thing that does not trend but stays with you, that if anything ever happened to one of them, the other would not remarry. You can manufacture chemistry for a season. You cannot manufacture that. The marriage deserves a sentence of its own, because it was built in the least promising soil in America. 2 television careers, 2 travel schedules, the constant low hum of public attention, and a hard, public road to parenthood that they discussed with unusual candor and that ended in a son they treasure. 2 decades in, they interview like people who still find each other interesting, which is rarer than it sounds in any industry and rarest of all in theirs. Where is he now? He is exactly what the first season promised the show would produce. A working businessman, 20 years married, still building. The winner who treated the television part as a doorway instead of a destination. Omarosa. One name, like the storm she was marketed as. Omarosa Manigault Newman was the breakout personality of that same first Apprentice season. The polished, ruthless, endlessly quotable competitor the editors could not get enough of. And she became the modern template for a whole profession. The reality villain as recurring character. She came back for season after season, spin-off after spin-off, decades of them, all the way to the recent villain ensemble shows, because producers know a fastball when they see one. 20 years is a long time to play the heel, and she played it at every scale the business could offer. Her road also ran, famously, through the actual White House, a chapter that belongs to the political historians and not to this book. Here is the chapter that belongs to us. In May of 2025, Omarosa graduated from law school. A law degree and a business degree earned in her 50s, a goal she had deferred for a quarter century of television, and she spoke about planning to practice with a major national firm. Consider the shape of that. Television spent 20 years handing her the villain's lines, and she responded in the end by going out and earning the right to write her own arguments. The kind a judge has to listen to all the way through. Whatever any viewer ever thought of her boardroom tactics, there is something undeniable about a person who spent 2 decades being cast as the antagonist and spent her own money and years becoming an advocate. Where is she now? Plotting a courtroom career with a fresh law degree, television's first great villainess, and it turns out the final twist was hers to write. Quaim Jackson. A Harvard MBA, a Goldman Sachs pedigree, and a final hiring decision people still argue about. Quaim Jackson was the gentleman of that first boardroom, the one who carried himself through the whole circus like someone who knew exactly who he was, and he lost the finish. What matters is what the loss cost him, which appears to be nothing. He took the visibility and built a career as a leadership strategist and keynote speaker, addressing corporations and universities, weighing in as a commentator on the business networks, running his own firm. As of the most recent accounting, he set off on something most executives only daydream about at the airport gate. A year-long journey through dozens of countries studying leadership around the world. A walkabout with a thesis. There is a version of his story where the loss defines him, where he spends 20 years as the answer to a trivia question, and the fact that the version never happened tells you what the boardroom cameras could not quite capture. The credentials were never the costume. Harvard and Goldman were simply who he was, and when the television chapter closed, he did not need anyone's permission to keep being formidable. Ask the business schools who they invite to speak about leadership under pressure, and his name keeps coming up, 20 years on, which is its own kind of final boardroom verdict. Where is he now? Somewhere on the far side of the world with a notebook, the one who lost the job offer and won the freedom, and the boardroom feels very small in the rear view. Alex Mitchell. He was the first Bachelor, the original. In 2002, before the Rose ceremony was a national institution, before the franchise had rules or lore or a fan economy, a Harvard and Stanford educated management consultant named Alex Mitchell stood in a mansion and handed a flower to one woman while another wept in a limousine, and a format that would run for 25 years and counting was born on his watch. He had no template to follow and no cautionary tales to study, because he was the template. And then the first Bachelor did what almost no Bachelor since has managed. He vanished completely and on purpose. No spin-offs, no podcasts, no paid partnerships, not even a tell-all. He went back to business, spent years as an executive at major companies, and has led a consulting firm in Washington for the better part of a decade. He is reported to be married with children, reported being the operative word, because he has never once confirmed his family life publicly, which after 2.5 decades of this franchise selling its participants' weddings and divorces by the pound, amounts to a philosophical statement. The most eligible man in America retired the title undefeated and never cashed it in. Where is he now? He is a businessman in Washington who politely declines to be a celebrity, the man who started the most public romance machine in television history, and then chose, forever, to keep his own private. The franchise never solved him, and there is something wonderful about that. Andrew Firestone. Among the vineyards of California's Central Coast, television loses its grip on a person fairly quickly. Andrew Firestone was the third Bachelor, the charming one, heir to a famous tire and wine family, and he ran his season in 2003 with an easy grin and then went home to the family business, which in his case meant those vines. He built a real career in hospitality and investment, founding a Santa Barbara firm that owns and operates hotels up and down the coast, hundreds of rooms, an actual empire of the unglamorous, profitable kind. The kind nobody makes a show about because it works. He married a woman he met after the show, and for 17 years theirs was held up as proof that a Bachelor could build a normal, lasting family, 3 kids, a life. In the fall of 2025, he and his wife announced, jointly and with obvious care for their children, that the marriage had ended and they are co-parenting. We include that not as gossip, but because this book does not airbrush. Most lives contain a chapter like it. Where is he now? He is a father of 3 running a hospitality company among the vines of the Central Coast, and the measure of the man is that even the hard announcement was made with grace. Trista and Ryan Sutter. And then there is the one that worked. In 2003, the franchise flipped the premise and let a woman hold the roses, and America chose its sweetheart, Trista Rehn, the pink-loving physical therapist, and she chose a shy firefighter poet from Colorado named Ryan Sutter, who wrote her vows in a trembling voice on live television, and 26 million people watched them marry in a wedding so pink it could be seen from space. Every cynic in America set a stopwatch. The stopwatch is still running, and it has been running for more than 22 years, which at this point is less a stopwatch than a grandfather clock. The Sutters raised 2 children, Max and Blakesley, in the Colorado mountains, where Ryan spent his career as an actual working firefighter. the job he had before the show and the job he kept. Because some men propose on television and then go right back to running into burning buildings, and apparently that is a personality type. Trista built a life as an author and occasional television presence, went on a grueling Special Forces competition show in 2024 just to test herself. And when her sequestered silence sparked internet breakup rumors, the two of them laughed the rumors to death publicly. This past winter, they celebrated Anniversary 22 and gave an interview about how there is nothing that is going to break them up. And they have talked about a big vow renewal celebration when their kids are grown and out, penciled for next year. 26 million people watched the wedding. The marriage, the actual thing, happened after everyone changed the channel, which is how marriages work. They are the founding couple of the entire franchise, the proof of concept, the reason every subsequent season could say it might really work. Where are they now? They are in Colorado, married, still visibly delighted by each other, the firefighter and the bachelorette, and the final rose, it turns out, never wilted. What the cameras bought and what they cost. We are halfway through the walk, and it is time to name the thing that runs underneath every story in this book like a fault line. Reality television pays in a currency no bank recognizes. It pays in being known. For a while, that feels like the most valuable thing on earth. Doors open. Rooms go quiet when you enter. Strangers love you, actual love, or something wearing love's clothes. Mail arrives from people who are certain they know you. Restaurants comp the check. The world tilts toward you slightly everywhere you stand. And then the season ends, and the show finds new faces, because the show always finds new faces, and the person is left holding a fame that is already evaporating and was never quite about them in the first place. It was about a character with their name, assembled in an editing bay by people they never met, out of their worst Tuesday and their loudest sentence. Nobody ever broadcast their Ordinary Wednesday, the one where they did the dishes and called their mother, because Ordinary Wednesdays do not rate. Here is what nobody handed them with the contract: an instruction manual for being a former castaway, former finalist, former villain. The soap actor who leaves a show is still an actor, but what is a former real person? There is no union for that, no night class, no support group that meets on Thursdays, although half the people in this book could have used one. The ones who thrived, you will notice, all solved the riddle the same way. They found the thing under the fame, the trade, the skill, the calling, the family, and they stood on that. The radio job, the nonprofit, the nursing degree, the band, the thing that was true at 6 in the morning with no cameras in the house. And the ones the road hurt were so often the ones who kept reaching for the applause after it had moved on, because nobody told them that applause was never the solid ground. It only ever sounded like it. Keep that in your pocket as we head into the loudest years this genre ever produced, the celebreality boom, when the cameras stopped following strangers and started following the famous into their own kitchens, and the whole bargain got stranger still. The characters television could not invent. By the middle 2000s, the networks had learned the second great lesson of the genre. You did not need a desert island. You did not need a prize. You needed a personality large enough to bend a room around itself, and then you needed to point a camera at it and stand back. VH1 and MTV built an entire programming era out of exactly that, and the personalities they found were so vivid that 20 years later the internet still speaks in their faces. Flavor Flav. Start with the elder statesman of the whole era, a man who has been famous in 3 completely different ways across 5 decades. William Drayton Jr. was already a legend before reality television touched him. The clock-wearing, high-stepping hype man of Public Enemy, one of the most important groups in the history of American music. Then in the middle 2000s, VH1 handed him a mansion and a cast of women competing for his heart. And Flavor of Love became the biggest thing on cable, a cultural supernova that made him, improbably, a bigger household name in his 50s than he had been in his 20s. The years around and after that fame included struggles he has talked about with complete openness, and this is where his story turns from entertaining to genuinely moving. Flavor Flav got sober, and he has been public about that journey in the way only he could be, including owning a brief relapse a while back, out loud, without excuses, and recommitting in front of everyone. That is not the arc of a mascot. That is a man doing the hardest kind of work with the least privacy in which to do it. And then came the third act nobody saw coming. In 2024, he became the official hype man and sponsor of the United States women's water polo team, an actual Olympic sponsorship he took on because he learned those athletes were working side jobs to train, and he showed up in Paris cheering like it was the front row of a Public Enemy show. Hold that picture for a second, because it may be the single best image in this book. A pool deck in Paris, the United States women's water polo team in the water, and a man in his 60s on his feet above them, a giant clock swinging against his chest, losing his mind with joy on their behalf. He liked it so much he added the bobsled and skeleton teams for the Winter Games this year, which makes him the only human being ever to serve as hype man for both Public Enemy and the United States bobsled team, a resume that cannot be duplicated because it should not be possible. Watch any clip of him poolside and try not to smile. Where is he now? He is sober, beloved, and cheering for America at the Olympics with a clock around his neck. And if you had told anyone in 2006 that Flavor Flav would become one of the purest feel-good stories in this entire book, they would have laughed. Nobody is laughing. Everybody is cheering back. Tiffany Pollard. She walked into that same mansion as a contestant, and she walked out as the main character of the entire era. Tiffany Pollard, who the show named New York, was electric in a way that cannot be taught, cast, or edited into existence. A one-woman thunderstorm of confidence and confrontation, and the network knew within one season that she could not be a supporting player in anyone's story. She got her own show, I Love New York, and it was enormous. The genre had found plenty of stars by accident. She may be the first one it simply could not contain. Here is the thing time has revealed. Long after the ratings era passed, Tiffany Pollard became something bigger than a television star. She became the internet's shared vocabulary. Her reactions, her expressions, her line readings are memes used millions of times a day by people who have never seen a single episode of her shows, which makes her, by some honest accounting, one of the most viewed performers on Earth every single day. Economists will tell you a reaction image is a kind of currency. By that measure, the woman is a mint, and the exchange rate has never once dipped. And unlike so many stars of that era, she never stopped working, villain ensembles, cooking shows, hosting gigs, celebrity competitions, right up through this year, because the thing she has cannot be taught and has not aged a day. In a recent interview, she spoke about her identity with a new openness, and she remains, in every appearance, unmistakably and unapologetically herself. Where is she now? She is working, streaming into your feed daily whether you know it or not, the undisputed monarch of the reaction image, and the era she defined has never actually ended. It just changed platforms. Bret Michaels. The rock star came to reality television when reality television needed a rock star. Bret Michaels had already lived a full arena life as the frontman of Poison, tens of millions of records, the bandana, the whole late 80s fireworks show. And in the middle 2000s, Rock of Love made him the genre's most improbable romantic lead, a tour bus bachelor with eyeliner. It worked so well it ran 3 times, and then he went and won Celebrity Apprentice in a season that ended with him, days after a brain hemorrhage that nearly killed him, walking back onto the stage anyway, a display of showmanship as stubborn as any in television memory. That stubbornness is the through line of the man. Bret Michaels has been a type 1 diabetic since childhood, has survived the hemorrhage, heart procedures, cancer scares, and the road itself, and he has kept touring through every bit of it, decade after decade, a man seemingly incapable of canceling a show. Somewhere tonight there is a stage with his name on the marquee, and the safest bet in entertainment is that he will be on it. Just last summer, his blood sugar crashed to a dangerous low as he came off stage, and he finally said out loud what nobody ever expected to hear from him, that the insane schedule has to slow down, that he intends to take care of himself. The long-hoped-for full reunion of his old band fell apart this year in a very public disagreement, so the solo road it remains. The bandana, for the record, stays on active duty. Where is he now? He is still out there under the lights, a little slower and a lot more honest about the cost. Every rose still has its thorn, and every tour still has its dates. And you would bet on him showing up long before you would bet on him sitting down. Kelly Osbourne. She grew up in front of us, literally, which is a sentence that sounds sweet until you actually think about it. When the Osbournes premiered in 2002, it invented the Celebrity Family show overnight, and 15-year-old Kelly, purple-haired, quick-tongued, hurling perfect insults at her brother across the kitchen, was its breakout star. The show made her famous before she had any chance to decide who she was, and she has spent the years since doing that deciding in public, through music, fashion commentary, television hosting, and a long, honest, sometimes interrupted journey to sobriety that she has never pretended was simple. Deciding who you are is hard enough in private. She has had to do her drafts in public, and the public kept every one. These last 2 years have asked more of her than any season of television ever did. In the summer of 2025, her father, the one and only Ozzy Osbourne, performed his farewell show with Black Sabbath in Birmingham, seated on a black throne, 17 days before he passed away, and the world grieved with the family in a way usually reserved for heads of state. Kelly had gotten engaged backstage at that final show, a burst of joy in the hardest season, and this spring that engagement ended without noise, which is a lot of life for 1 year. She stood with her family at the Grammy tribute to her father, raising her young son, taking it a day at a time in front of the same public that watched her grow up. Where is she now? She is grieving and enduring, a woman the cameras met at 15 who has never once had the option of falling apart in private. And she is still standing, which, considering the year she has had, is its own kind of remarkable. Jack Osbourne. The little brother from that same kitchen took the strangest and steadiest road of the whole family. Jack Osbourne was 16 when the show made him famous, and he has been honest about how hard the early fame years were, and how young he got sober, decades ago now, one of the longest-running sobrieties in this entire book, begun at an age when the culture around him still treated excess as a personality. Then at 26 came a diagnosis that would have flattened most people, multiple sclerosis, delivered weeks after his first daughter was born. He responded by becoming one of the most visible MS advocates in the country, hosting documentary series, doing adventure and paranormal shows, building a steady broadcasting career out of exactly the kind of curiosity the original show first captured. This year handed him the same grief it handed his sister, and also a joy. In March of 2026, months after losing his father, Jack and his wife welcomed a baby girl, his 5th child, and they gave her a name that made everyone who read it smile through the lump in their throat. Ozzy. Somewhere in a nursery right now, a baby named for the Prince of Darkness is sleeping soundly, and that is the kind of ending no editing bay ever cut together. Where is he now? He is a sober father of 5 living well with MS, carrying his father's name forward in the form of a baby daughter. And of all the kids reality television ever raised, he might be the sturdiest thing it ever built. The Golden Coast. Somewhere around 2004, the cameras discovered the California coastline and the beautiful young people on it, and the genre invented something new again. Laguna Beach and the hills did not look like reality television. They looked like cinema, golden hour light, whispered restaurant conversations, a soundtrack that sold 1 million downloads, and they made stars of a group of young women whose every friendship and feud became national curriculum. For the first time, the genre had discovered the ordinary Tuesday as art, sunlight on a parking lot, a phone flipped shut in anger, and it turned out you could score that like a movie. Alongside them, an heiress with a small dog and her best friend were turning a fish-out-of-water show called The Simple Life into the launch pad for 2 of the most surprising business careers of the century. The tabloids called them It Girls. The tabloids, as usual, undersold them. Lauren Conrad. One tear, one boy, one trip to Paris not taken. Entire film schools have failed to produce a moment as efficient as the one Lauren Conrad delivered in a single tearful sentence, and it became one of the defining television moments of the decade. She was the center of it all, the calm eye of the entire storm, the girl the narrator's voice belonged to. She went from a Laguna Beach high schooler to the lead of the hills, and for the back half of the 2000s, she was arguably the most famous 20-something woman in America. Her friendships, her heartbreaks, and one legendary piece of advice she declined to take, all of it broadcast to millions. And then at the absolute peak, she left, walked off her own show on her own timing, and executed the cleanest pivot this genre has ever seen. Fashion lines, including a collaboration with a national retailer that ran for years and years. A string of #1 selling novels about, of course, a girl navigating fame. Write what you know, the teachers say. She knew plenty. A fair trade shop she co-founded to support artisans around the world. A marriage to a musician turned law student, 2 sons, a home life she keeps mostly, deliberately off camera. This spring she stepped back into the frame just once, for a 20th anniversary Laguna Beach reunion special, older and easy about all of it, publicly warm again with old rivals. Then she went home again because the exit was never a stunt. It was the plan, and she is the one who executed it first and cleanest. Use the door before the door uses you. Where is she now? She is a businesswoman, author, and mother of 2 who visits her own legend occasionally. Like a woman stopping by a house she used to live in, fond of it, and finished with it. Heidi Montag and Spencer Pratt. Nobody in this book was booed longer or more sincerely. Heidi Montag and Spencer Pratt were the villains of the Golden Coast, the couple America loved to hate, and they turned playing the bad guys of the hills into an art form, then paid the full price for it, the flame-out, the mockery, the years when the phone stopped ringing and the money was gone. They stayed married through every bit of it, which nobody predicted, and raised 2 sons, and rebuilt themselves as something the culture did not have a word for yet, a family documenting its own comeback. Their story since is one of the strangest and lately most weirdly triumphant this genre has to offer. Then in January of 2025, their home in the Palisades burned to the ground in the wildfires, with everything in it. And what happened next belongs in the textbook of turning it around. The internet decided, 15 years late and all at once, that it had loved Heidi's pop album the whole time, streaming it up the actual charts in a spontaneous act of collective sympathy. And she leaned all the way in, performing this summer to the biggest crowd of her life at a London festival. Spencer, documenting the rebuild daily, decided the city's response to the fires was inadequate and did the most Spencer Pratt thing imaginable. He ran for mayor of Los Angeles. He finished 3rd in this June's primary with a quarter of the vote, ahead of nearly everyone's expectations, conceded gracefully, and went back to his family, their lawsuit over the fire response, and a streaming project about starting over. Somewhere out there, a 2008 message board is still trying to process all of this. Where are they now? They are rebuilding a house, and somehow, 20 years after America voted them least likely, modeling resilience in public, the villains who turned out to be the couple that stays. Kristin Cavallari. An eyebrow arch launched 1,000 message board wars in 2004, and the woman attached to it proved to be one of the sharpest business people the genre ever produced. Kristin Cavallari was the rival, the other one, and she came out of Laguna Beach and the hills, did the acting and hosting circuit, married an NFL quarterback, and then when that chapter ended, built her real empire. Uncommon James, the jewelry and lifestyle company she founded, now does tens of millions in annual revenue, with retail stores and another opening this summer. And her podcast is a chart regular where she says exactly what she thinks, which has never once been a problem for her. She raises her 3 kids outside Nashville, appeared at this year's Laguna Beach reunion having long since made peace with Lauren, and even re-released the choker necklace she wore in the 2000s as a 20th anniversary wink. It sold, of course. Everything she touches lately does, which must be a satisfying feeling for a woman the edit spent years insisting was the problem. Where is she now? Running the empire she built after the cameras, a Nashville mom whose company most of her old castmates would have to make an appointment to visit, and the girl the edit made the villain turned out to be the CEO. Audrina Patridge. Not every story from the Golden Coast needed an empire. Audrina Patridge was the sweet one with the unreadable eyes, the loyal friend caught between the warring queens of the hills, and her road since has been gentler and more human-scaled than most in this section. She kept working in television, took her turn on the dancing show, wrote a memoir, went through a marriage and a hard public divorce, and has poured her real energy into raising her daughter. Her family has known genuine grief in recent years, the kind that puts every message board feud of 2008 into its proper insignificance. These days, she is in a happy relationship with a country singer, telling an interviewer this spring that she is open to forever again, and she turned up smiling at the reunion events, at the premieres, cheering on, of all people, Spencer Pratt's mayoral run. Where is she now? A working mom in California, easy in her own skin at last, and if the others from that beach built companies and comebacks, she built the thing none of them could buy: peace. Paris Hilton. Now the heiress. It is genuinely difficult from this distance to explain how completely Paris Hilton owned the middle 2000s and how completely the culture misread her. The simple life made her catchphrase a national language. The tabloids made her their permanent front page. She was photographed more often than presidents and understood less than practically anyone. And the whole time, the culture told itself she was an empty vessel, famous for nothing. And she let it think so, because, as she revealed much later, the baby-voiced airhead was a character she had invented, and underneath it was one of the shrewdest brand builders of her generation. Count what she built: a fragrance and licensing empire measured in the billions of dollars of retail sales, a pioneering turn as one of the highest-paid DJs in the world, a job the culture insisted she could not possibly do right up until the checks cleared, a media company named for the hour 11:11 that now signs multi-year deals with century-old consumer brands, produces podcasts, and this year is even launching a children's book series about, naturally, a glamorous pup. And then there is the part of her story that changed laws. Paris came forward with the account of what was done to her as a teenager in the troubled teen residential industry, and she turned her fame into a legislative battering ram, testifying, lobbying, standing with survivors, putting reform bills over the line. Lawmakers who could not have named a single one of her perfumes have now voted on bills her testimony moved. The girl the culture called famous for nothing has literal statutes to her name. She is married, a mother of two, and her family too lost a home in the January 2025 fires, a grief she processed in public with more grace than the public ever showed her. Where is she now? She is a billion-dollar chief executive, an advocate whose work protects children she will never meet, and the biggest joke of the 2000s landed in the end on everyone who thought she was the joke. Nicole Richie. The best friend riding shotgun on The Simple Life was doing a bit of her own the entire time. Nicole Richie, Lionel's daughter, matched Paris beat for beat through 5 seasons of fish out of water comedy, and then took the exit ramp into the most credible creative career of the whole It Girl generation. Her fashion line, House of Harlow, became a genuine and durable brand. She wrote novels. She quietly became one of the funniest people in Hollywood, a fact the industry finally caught up to, culminating this June in a theatrical comedy film in which she co-stars alongside Sarah Michelle Gellar, a proper movie career arriving right on her own schedule, 20 years after the tabloids wrote her off. She has been married to musician Joel Madden for well over a decade, and their daughter Harlow is 18 now, which is a sentence that will make an entire generation feel the passage of time in their knees. Where is she now? A fashion founder, author, and actress with a movie in theaters, a wife and mother of two, and of everyone the 2000s underestimated, she may have had the last, driest laugh. 15 minutes extended. A brief word about a strange kind of immortality, because this section is full of it. Somewhere along the way, the internet changed what happens to reality stars after the show's end. It used to be that when the season ended, you faded. Now the internet takes your single greatest facial expression, your most perfectly delivered sentence, your one incandescent moment of side eye, and it keeps it forever in circulation, like currency. Tiffany Pollard's expressions are a daily language for millions who never saw her shows. A gif of a woman crying about Paris travels the world every single day. Heidi Montag's old album can be resurrected by strangers in an afternoon of collective goodwill. The 15 minutes did not end. It shattered into 1 billion 3-second pieces and embedded itself into how humanity talks to itself. Which means the people in this book are, in a real sense, more present in daily life now than they were at the height of their ratings. They just are not always attached to the moment. Somewhere tonight a teenager will send a reaction image of a woman whose name they do not know to make a friend laugh, and it will work. And that woman is in this book at a grocery store in New Jersey or a ranch in Missouri, gloriously unaware. Fame used to be a bonfire, enormous and brief. This is something else, a pilot light, small and permanent, burning in 100 million phones at once. Nobody signed up for that clause either, because in 2004 the lawyers had not imagined it yet. That is the strangest afterlife any kind of famous has ever had. We are all quoting them forever. The least we can do is remember they are real. The Shore. In the winter of 2009, MTV rented a house in Seaside Heights, New Jersey, filled it with 8 young Italian Americans who had never met, pointed the cameras, and accidentally created the last true monoculture hit of the reality era. Jersey Shore was mocked by every critic in America and watched by every single one of them anyway. The cast had a private vocabulary that became a national one, a nightly routine that became a lifestyle brand, and a fame so sudden and so total that within a year they were among the highest paid people in television. 8 kids who had been anonymous in June were, by the following summer, a language the whole country spoke. The joke, repeated everywhere, was that these kids were a sign of the end of civilization. The kids, it turned out, were paying closer attention than anybody. They banked the appearance fees, built the brands, took the nicknames America laughed at and turned them into businesses. And they did it while the critics were still drafting obituaries for Western culture. Nicole Palizzi, Snooki. 4'8" of pure event television walked into a Seaside Heights beach house in 2009, and the culture spent years underestimating her at its own expense. Nicole Palizzi, Snooki to the entire planet, was the party girl of record for a generation. And then, in what remains one of the great pivots in the genre's history, she simply grew up on schedule and brought the audience with her. Marriage to Gianni, 3 kids, a boutique business in New Jersey, a hit podcast, and a permanent seat on the family reunion version of the show that made her famous, where the pint-sized wild child of 2009 is now, hilariously and touchingly, the den mother, the one reminding everyone to drink water and call their mothers. This year handed her a fight none of us wanted to read about. In February of 2026, she went public with a cervical cancer diagnosis, caught at stage 1 after years of watchful screenings, and she did the most Snooki thing possible with it. She took it to the cameras on her own terms, told the country it was caught early and curable, scheduled her surgery, and turned the whole thing into a national reminder, delivered with her trademark zero solemnity for women to go get their screenings. It was the same directness she brought to everything, pointed for once at the thing that actually mattered. The treatment is underway as we speak. The outlook by every account is good, and the tone from her corner remains defiantly bright. Where is she now? She is a wife and mother of 3 in New Jersey, facing down a diagnosis in public with the same unbothered nerve she once brought to a beach house, and several million women have booked overdue appointments because of her. Meatballs, it turns out, are tougher than anyone knew. Mike Sorrentino, The Situation. His is the great redemption story of the entire genre, full stop. Mike Sorrentino arrived in that house with a nickname for his own abdomen and became, within months, one of the highest-earning personalities on television, and the crash that followed was just as spectacular. An opioid addiction that took root behind the scenes at the very height of the fame. Tax charges that ended in a federal prison sentence. By the late 2010s, The Situation was the culture's shorthand for the reality star cautionary tale. The abs had been on every screen in America. The addiction never made the edit, which tells you everything about which reality the reality show was selling. Watch what he did with it, because this is the part they should teach. He got sober in December of 2015 and has not looked back since, more than a decade now. He served his time, paid every dollar of his restitution, married Lauren, the college sweetheart who stood by him through the worst of it, and came home to build the life the first fame never gave him a chance at. 3 children. A best-selling memoir about the addiction, told without excuses. And then the move that elevates the whole story, he took his experience and built Archangel Centers, a growing network of actual addiction treatment facilities in New Jersey, now expanding into multiple states this year, where the man once famous for his abs employs clinicians and walks recovering people through the door he found himself. Ask anyone in that field what the best credential in the building is, and it is not framed on a wall. It is a founder who has sat on both sides of the intake desk. He celebrated 10 years clean this past December with his kids around him. Where is he now? He is 11 years sober, a husband, a father of 3, and the founder of treatment centers healing people with the exact disease that nearly took him. And if you want a single sentence for what this whole book believes, it is this one: the comeback is always available. Jenny Farley, J. Wawa. In June of 2026, her castmates filed into a New Jersey venue expecting a screening of her new thriller film. The lights came up on a wedding. Jenny Farley married wrestler Zach Carpinello right in front of them, before anyone quite understood what was happening, which is the most J. Wawa move in a career built on them. She was always the fierce one, the protector of the house, and her second act has been a steady march toward exactly the life she wanted. Businesses built out of the fame, tanning lotion to toddler clothes, 2 children raised, a difficult public divorce weathered, and a standing place in the family reunion seasons as the one you do not cross and the one you call first. Snooki was in the room for the wedding, which is only right, 16 years after they met in a house neither of them knew would define their lives. Where is she now? A newlywed entrepreneur and mother with a movie in the can, still absolutely nobody to trifle with, and the friendship at the center of her story has outlasted every headline that predicted otherwise. Paul Del Vecchio, DJ Pauly D. He came into the house with one skill, one hairstyle, and one catchphrase, and he proved the most durable professional of the entire cast. Paul Del Vecchio was a working club DJ from Rhode Island before the show, and he simply kept being one at 1,000 times the scale, Las Vegas residencies, a touring calendar that has never slowed, an actual music business career that this year grew into his own label. The hair remains structurally identical, a fact he treats with the reverence of a national monument, and rightly so, because 16 years of shore humidity have thrown everything they have at it, and the hair is undefeated. He has been in a steady, long-term relationship for years. When the network announced this spring that the long-running family reunion series would wrap with its current season, Pauly responded like a man who knows the party merely changes venues, teasing that they were all just getting started. Where is he now? Behind the decks in Las Vegas, running a record label, 16 years into a career the critics gave 16 weeks, and of everyone from that beach house, the guy hired for the party turned out to be the steadiest man at work. The families we moved in with. The last great territory the cameras conquered was the family home. Not celebrities' homes, ordinary ones, or homes that started ordinary. a couple in Pennsylvania raising sextuplets and twins, a Louisiana clan that made duck calls, a beauty pageant kid in rural Georgia and her larger-than-life mother, a bounty hunter and his tribe. These shows offered the most intimate bargain of all, an entire family's daily life for our entertainment, and they produced some of the warmest television of the era and some of the most sobering lessons about what happens when the family is the show and the show ends. Because a castaway goes home when the season wraps. A family is already home. The cameras were inside it. John Gosselin. John and Kate plus 8 was, for several years, the biggest thing on cable. A Pennsylvania household with 8 children under 6 and 2 parents fraying in high definition. When the marriage collapsed in 2009, it collapsed on every magazine cover in America simultaneously, and John Gosselin became the most photographed father in the country at the precise moment his life was coming apart. No manual existed for that either, and the photographers do not wait while you write one. The years since have been, by his own telling, a long walk back to normal. He left television entirely for stretches, worked regular jobs, and built a steady life as a DJ in Pennsylvania, which he still is, booked and busy on the weekends the way working DJs are. The family's fractures are real and public, and we will not pretend otherwise, though we will also not sort through them, because 10 children of divorce did not ask for any of this. What can be said kindly is this. In November of 2025, John remarried, a quiet Pennsylvania wedding to his longtime partner Stephanie with his son Colin, with whom he has rebuilt a close bond nearby. He talks these days like a man who long ago stopped chasing the old fame and mostly wants a calm Tuesday. Where is he now? He is a working DJ and a newlywed in Pennsylvania, on good terms with some of his children and honest about the distance with others. A man rebuilding, brick by ordinary brick, the private life the show once traded away. Kate Gosselin. Her road leads somewhere almost nobody guessed. Kate Gosselin was, for years, one of the most scrutinized mothers in America, the exacting center of the sextuplet household, then a fixture of the spin-off and competition circuit, dancing, racing, dating, always with the cameras somewhere nearby. And then the bookings thinned, the kids grew, and the money, she has said plainly, largely ran out. What does the most famous mom in America do when the show is over? The tabloids never ran the answer, because the answer contained no scandal at all. She goes back to work, real work, the work she trained for before any of it, because Kate Gosselin was a registered nurse before she was ever a television name. Today she lives in North Carolina and works as a pediatric home healthcare nurse, 12-hour shifts caring for medically complex children, her license current and renewed. Sit with that image for a second. A dim room, a monitor blinking, a fragile child asleep, and the woman keeping watch through the small hours is the same woman whose household once drew 10 million viewers a week, unphotographed now, doing something that matters more than any of it ever did. The family's estrangements grieve everyone who watched those kids grow up, and they are not ours to adjudicate. But her answer to the question this series asks is as humbling as any this book contains. Where is she now? On a night shift in North Carolina, a working nurse again, and whatever else the years took, they could not take the thing she was before the cameras came. June Shannon, Mama June. There is falling down in public, and then there is what June Shannon did, which was fall all the way down and climb all the way back with everyone still watching. June Shannon entered the culture as the coupon-clipping matriarch of Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, a show America watched with a smirk that slowly became a genuine fondness, because whatever else that household was, it was warm. The critics came for the accents and stayed for the love, and were mostly too embarrassed to say so. Then came the years that were not warm at all, the addiction that took her teeth, her savings, her custody, and very nearly her life. All of it documented, because in this family even the collapse was on camera. She got clean, more than 5 years sober now, rebuilt from a night she has described as her rock bottom, and the rebuilding was tested by the cruelest thing a parent can face. In December of 2023, her eldest daughter, Anna, whom the world knew as Chickadee, died of cancer at 29. June has spoken about that loss with a rawness no producer could script, and she stepped up to take custody of Anna's youngest daughter, Kaitlyn, whom she is now raising, a grandmother turned mother again in her mid-50s. There is no camera angle that makes that anything other than what it is, a woman doing the next right thing with the time she fought to get back. Her show goes on, another season this spring, now documenting sobriety, grief, and a new health scare she has faced openly. Where is she now? She is sober in Georgia, raising her granddaughter, carrying a grief that never fully sets down. And the woman America once treated as a punchline has outlasted, outgrown, and outclassed the joke. Alana Thompson and the little girl at the center of all of it grew up to be the best plot twist in the family. Alana Thompson was 6 years old when Honey Boo Boo became a national catchphrase, a pageant kid with a catchphrase of her own. And the culture wondered aloud, for years, what would become of a child raised inside that much spotlight. Here is what became of her. She graduated high school, packed up, and moved across the country to Colorado, where she is a nursing student at a university in Denver, on track to graduate next year, with her sights set on pediatric intensive care. Somewhere in a Denver library tonight there is a 20-year-old bent over a pharmacology textbook whom an entire country once watched do pageants at 6, and she is not thinking about any of that because she has an exam. Read that again. The most famous child of the reality era is planning to spend her life in the unit where the sickest children go, and the sister she lost to cancer is, by her own telling, part of why. She lives with her longtime boyfriend, visits her family, and handles interviews about her chaotic childhood with a level-headedness that would be impressive at twice her age. Where is she now? She is 20 years old in Denver, studying for a nursing degree, and of every future America imagined for Honey Boo Boo, nobody had the imagination for this one. The child the cameras raised becoming the adult who shows up when your child needs saving. Phil Robertson, the patriarch of the Duck Call dynasty, is the newest loss in this book, and his life made the strangest journey to television of anyone in it. Phil Robertson was a Louisiana athlete who once started at quarterback ahead of a future NFL legend and walked away from football because it interfered with duck season, a line that tells you everything. He built a duck call in a shed, built it into a business, and built his family into Duck Dynasty, which at its peak was the biggest reality show cable television has ever aired. Nearly 12 million people tuning in to watch a bearded clan of Louisiana hunters prey over dinner. No competitions, no roses, no votes. A family, a table, and grace said over the food, and it beat everything else on cable. His family shared in December of 2024 that Phil was suffering from Alzheimer's disease along with other illness, and he passed on May 25, 2025, at 79, 1 week before the family's revival series returned to the air. The tributes from across the country all orbited the same facts. A man who lived precisely as he preached, disappeared every duck season, baptized people in the river behind his house, and died surrounded by the family that had made him famous by simply filming him being himself. Where is he now? He is in the family he left behind, in a company still stamping duck calls in West Monroe, and in the river baptisms that were always, to him, the point of the platform. In memoriam, Phil Robertson, 1946 to 2025. Willie Robertson. Somebody had to keep the dynasty flying, and it fell to the son with the bandana and the business degree. Willie Robertson was the chief executive of Duck Commander through the show's massive run, the middle generation who translated his father's shed workshop into a national brand. And he has spent the years since the original show doing more of exactly that. The family returned to television with a revival series, now in its second season this spring, built openly around the question of succession, Willie easing toward the edge of the nest as the next generation steps up. He and his wife Corey launched a faith and family entertainment company this year with a feature film on the way. They have 11 grandchildren, A number Willie reports with the visible disbelief of a man who is certain he was in his 30s about a week ago. And the family buried its patriarch last spring and kept going the way big families do together, at a long table with too much food on it. Where is he now? West Monroe, Louisiana, semi-retiring on his own terms from the company his father built in a shed, and the beard, you will be relieved to hear, remains fully operational. Dwayne Chapman, Dog. For 8 seasons, Dog the Bounty Hunter was as recognizable as anyone on television. The leonine blonde mullet, the leather, the prayer circle before every hunt. A former convict who had turned his own hardest chapters into a career bringing in fugitives, and more often than the cameras let on, talking to them like a counselor on the drive-in. His shows made bail bonds a family business the whole country knew on a first-name basis. The years since have included fame's whole arc, spin-offs, losses, controversies he has publicly apologized for, and a lot of grief, which we will leave in the family's keeping where it belongs. Today, Dwayne Chapman is in his early 70s, remarried, living in Florida, and still working the only 2 beats he has ever worked, Faith and Pursuit. This spring he made headlines not for chasing a fugitive, but for fronting a national campaign to rescue shelter dogs, putting up a reward himself, Dog Hunting for Dogs, a headline writer's dream and a genuinely sweet turn. He still packs convention halls of fans who grew up watching him kick indoors and then pray, and both halves of that sentence were always real, which is why both halves still draw a crowd. Where is he now? He is in Florida with Francie, an old lion doing kinder hunts, and the mullet, like the man, has survived everything. Carson Kressley. In 2003, 5 gay men walked into straight America's living rooms and remade them, along with a fair portion of the culture, and the one with the fastest tongue was a Pennsylvania farm boy with an encyclopedic knowledge of fashion and a genuine gift for kindness disguised as sass. The sass was the delivery system. The kindness was the payload. Carson Kressley was the breakout star of the original Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, a show that won Emmys and changed minds at a moment when that change was far from guaranteed, and it made him one of the first openly gay household names in the country. He never stopped working, and he never stopped being exactly himself. 2 decades of hosting, style books, Broadway turns, and a long-running seat as a judge on one of television's most beloved competition shows, where a new generation knows him without knowing what doors he helped open. This year alone, he launched a home decor collection inspired by his actual lifelong passion, championship horses, which he owns and shows, a fact that has been surprising strangers for 20 years, though presumably never the horses, and signed on as a national travel ambassador. Where is he now? He is everywhere he has always been, on your television, being quicker than everyone else in the room, a pioneer who made it look so easy that people forget it ever needed doing. Ty Pennington. Move that bus. For 9 seasons, those 3 words, bellowed through a megaphone by a carpenter with rock star hair, preceded the single most reliable cry in television. Extreme Makeover Home Edition built houses for families in crisis, and Ty Pennington was its megaphone heart, the design world's first action hero. And the show remains, for millions, the standard answer to the question of when television last regularly made you sob for good reasons. It was manipulation, technically, and everyone knew it, and nobody cared, because at the end of the manipulation, a family had a house. He has stayed on the air ever since, a 1/4 century of design and competition shows on the home networks, hosting a block-building competition series whose latest season aired this spring from Las Vegas. He survived a frightening health emergency a few years back, an infection that put him in an induced coma, and came back from it with characteristic bounce, married now, still swinging hammers on camera as he crosses into his 60s, still incapable of saying a sentence at a volume lower than a pep rally. Where is he now? On a build site somewhere, yelling encouragement through the sawdust, still the most enthusiastic man in home improvement, And somewhere in America right now, a rerun bus is moving and a family is weeping, and it still works every single time. And a closing pair of context notes for this section, because two hosts have become the genre's living monuments. Julie Chen Moons opened the very first season of Big Brother in the summer of 2000 and opened its 28th, and the franchise's 1000th episode this very July. And across the dial, the island's torch is still lit after 50 seasons. The strangers change. The witnesses remarkably remain. Somewhere tonight a torch is being carried down a beach path, and the same voice that read the first vote will read the next one. The redemption arcs. Before we close the album, look back down the road we just walked, because a pattern has been keeping us company the whole way, and it deserves to be said out loud. This genre was supposed to be a meat grinder. That was the accusation from the very beginning, that reality television found ordinary people, used them up, and threw them away, and there are stories in this book that give the accusation teeth. But set the redemptions side by side and look at them. The situation, from federal prison and a needle's edge to 11 years sober, and a chain of treatment centers with his name on the deed. Mama June, from rock bottom to raising her late daughter's little girl. Flavor Flav, from the tabloids to the Olympic pool deck, sober, owning even his stumbles in public. William hung facing down a gambling problem and walking back to the numbers. Kelly Pickler standing back up on the very stage where she started, singing the very song. The pattern repeats and repeats, and it repeats in front of witnesses, which is the part that should stop you. These people did not get to recover in private. They fell down with the whole country watching, and they got up the same way. Here is what the redemption arcs have in common, and it is not talent, and it is not luck. Every single one of them stopped performing at exactly one moment, the moment they admitted out loud that they were in trouble. The genre that built them runs on image management, on the confessional as performance, a booth where you go to say the sharp thing about your roommate. And every one of these people got their life back the instant they used the confessional for confessing, not the produced version. The real one, the one with a cost. Watch the tape of any of them saying it, the addiction, the diagnosis, the debt, and you can see the moment the performance drops because the face changes, and it changes into something the editing bay never could manufacture, which is relief. There is a lesson in that for people who have never been on television in their lives, which is most of us, and it is the oldest one there is. The truth is expensive, and it is still the cheapest thing on the menu. What we talk about when we ask where they are now. So what did we actually learn, walking this whole road? From a Soho loft in 1992 to a Denver nursing school in 2026. We learned that the fame these shows manufacture is the strangest fame there is, because it is intimacy without acquaintance. 50 million people knew Sue Hawk's voice at its angriest, and not one of them knew her. A whole country had opinions about Kate Gosselin's marriage, and none of it helped her raise 8 children. The bargain looked like a lottery ticket and read, in the fine print, like a mortgage. And the people who came through it best were almost always the ones who understood early that the wave was weather and the ground was theirs. Hold the pictures side by side because the pictures are the argument. A truck rolling through Missouri at first light. A night nurse in a dim room in North Carolina. A clock necklace swinging over an Olympic pool. A radio studio in the dark before the morning show. A bar in Montana, a pastry oven warming, a nursing textbook open in Denver, a torch still burning on a beach after 50 seasons. Not one of those pictures has a red carpet in it. That is the finding if a book like this can be said to have won. The genre sold spectacle, and the people who survived it went out and built lives made almost entirely of the unspectacular. The shift, the practice, the marriage, the meeting, the route driven well. We learned that the exits matter more than the entrances. Everyone in this book entered the same way, through an audition tape or a casting scout or a newspaper ad, wide-eyed, unprepared, carrying a duffel bag and a personality. But the exits are where the characters showed. Some walked off camera at the peak on purpose and never looked back, and we should say their names with respect, Colleen and Sue and Alex, the ones who used the door. Some turned the fame into fuel for something real: a company, a cause, a clinic, a classroom. Some went home and resumed the person they had never stopped being, and it took years for anyone to notice that was the win. The genre kept score in seasons and spin-offs, so it had no column for those people, and they did not mind because they were keeping score in something else, in shifts worked and kids raised and mornings on the air. And some could not find the exit for a long time, wandered, got hurt, and are finding it now, one honest day after another, with the country still watching. And there is more courage in that than in anything that ever happened on an island. And we learned this, which might be the whole point. The culture spent 30 years feeling superior to these people. Reality stars were the punchline of the entire entertainment industry, the shorthand for unearned fame, for the end of civilization, for everything wrong with everything. And now look at the ledger. The punchlines run billion-dollar companies. The villains earned law degrees. The party girls became den mothers and advocates. The airhead changed federal legislation. The meathead builds treatment centers. The pageant kid is going to be a pediatric intensive care nurse. Meanwhile, the whole world got a smartphone and started posting its breakfast, its breakups, and its bathroom mirrors, and the distance between us and them collapsed to nothing. We are all on the show now. The confessional became the front camera. The tribal council became the comment section. Every one of us curates a highlight reel and manages a public self and knows the small dread of a post that lands wrong. The people in this book were not the end of civilization. They were the scouts. They went first into the condition the rest of us live in now, with no map and no warning, and the ones who came through whole came through carrying exactly the knowledge everyone with a phone in their pocket needs. They were never famous for nothing. They were famous for being knowable, which turns out to be the most demanding job in entertainment, because the only way to do it is to hand strangers the raw material of your actual life and hope they are kind. Mostly, we were not. We reviewed their marriages like restaurants. We graded their grief. The least we can do now is finish the story properly. A word for the listener. So here is what we would ask of you, now that you have taken this walk. The next time one of these names crosses your feed, the next time an algorithm serves you a face from a show you watched in a dorm room or a first apartment or your mother's living room, remember that there was a real human being inside the character, a person who gave you something on the worst weeks of your own life, who gave you a house to argue about, a couple to root for, a villain to boo, somewhere to put all that feeling on a Wednesday night. That was a service, whether or not anyone called it one at the time, and it was performed by amateurs with no training and no protection live for years. Be a little gentler with them than the internet will be. Root for the comebacks. Forgive the ones who stumbled because you have now heard what the stumbling cost them. Say a quiet thank you for the ones who are gone. And maybe extend the same mercy a little closer to home. Everyone you know is now a person on a screen somewhere, performing a little, editing a little, hoping the audience is kind. The people in this book learned the hard way that the person and the post are not the same thing, and that confusing the two is where all the damage starts. They paid the full tuition on that lesson, so the rest of us could audit the course. You know their names because they learned it in front of 50 million people. You can learn it for free tonight from your couch, which is, when you think about it, the best deal this genre ever offered anybody. Here is the last thing, and then we will let you go. Somewhere out there tonight, a casting producer is watching an audition tape of a person you have never heard of, some big laughing personality from some ordinary town, and next year the entire country will know their face and have opinions about their relationship and quote them at the office. It has been more than 30 years and the machine has never once slowed down. The shows change names. The islands change oceans. The bargain never changes at all. Be kind to that person too when they arrive on your screen, because you know now what they are walking into. And they, like every single soul in this book before them, have absolutely no idea. Where are they now? Right now, they are just an ordinary person about to stop being polite and start getting real. Thank you for taking this walk back with us. Go call someone you used to watch these shows with. Argue about the old seasons. Take the villain's side this time just to see how it feels. We will see you on the next one. Books by Barron, Where Are They Now? A note on respect and language. This program was made in the belief that the people it profiles are owed dignity, especially the ones whose stories turned hard. Where a life involved addiction, illness, legal trouble, grief, or loss, we have tried to name the truth without wallowing in it. We did not include a subject in order to expose them, and we deliberately left out details that would serve only to sensationalize a person's worst moments. Contested matters are described as contested, private matters are left private, and where we could not verify something, we left it out rather than guess. If we fell short of that standard anywhere, the fault is ours, and we welcome the correction. A note on sources. Everything in this book is drawn from the public record. Published interviews, contemporaneous news reporting and obituaries, broadcast footage, official announcements, and statements the subjects made themselves. Present-day status for each subject was checked against current reporting rather than memory, because the whole point of asking where they are now is to answer it accurately, and lives change faster than reputations do. Where accounts differed, we favored the most reliable and most recent. No private information was used, and nothing was invented. About the Where Are They Now series. Where Are They Now is a nostalgia retrospective series from Books by Barron that follows the people who once lived on our screens and asks the question time always leaves behind. What happened to them next? Each episode profiles a category of once famous people and tells, person by person, where they are now, the good landings and the hard roads and the quiet second acts, built entirely from the public record and narrated with warmth and respect. If this one meant something to you, there are more, and there is another on the way. Disclosure. This program is an independent work of biography and commentary produced by Books by Barron and Barron Darby. It is built entirely from publicly available information. It is not authorized, endorsed by, or affiliated with any of the individuals profiled, or their families, estates, representatives, studios, networks, or production companies, including MTV, CBS, ABC, NBC, VH1, A&E, TLC, WATV, Bravo, Hulu, Netflix, or any other organization named. All interpretation and opinion expressed is the author's own commentary. Names, show titles, and trademarks remain the property of their respective owners and are used here for the purposes of commentary, criticism, and historical discussion. Every effort has been made to be accurate and fair. Corrections are genuinely welcomed and will be addressed in good faith.